It's being recorded. Cool. Okay. So hello, everybody. Welcome to the Barcelona Free Software Meetup. We are a meetup that have a very nice T-shirt. We do have things in Twitter, Mastodon, and Meetup, right? So like and subscribe and follow and all those things that people do. So yeah, we have very nice T-shirts. As I said, if you all want a nice T-shirt, you can donate me money and I will donate you a T-shirt. What else? And nothing else. We do things every month, kind of, more or less. We will not be doing things over the summer because it's too hot and people don't like going to places. So probably this will be the last one until September or something. Anyhow, if you want something to talk, come and talk to me or the other people in red. Only Pablo has red today, but yeah, or Muriel or Albert. And we will try to schedule a talk for you. We do things free software and friends, free culture, free hardware, and whatnot. And thanks to Advinta for hosting us here. They're great. So Juanfran is going to speak about Advinta now.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I'm Juanfran Fernandez. I am a machine learning engineer here in Advinta, and I welcome all of you to our premises that today are hosting the meeting. And let me introduce a little bit our company. So Advinta is an international company. We are right now in 11 countries, mainly in Europe, but we have presence as well in America. And we are a company that does classified boards of classified advertisements, and we operate mainly in 3 verticals, which are real estate, mobility, generalist, which means that could have real estate or mobility, but not dedicated, not with the same services. And we have something that is called emerging verticals that have job boards. Okay, and then let me show you a little video that is very explanative. Do you hear the video? No? Oh, yeah. This happens with live. Sorry. Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, let's try it again. No, it's not delivering. No worries. It has captions, so you can just read the captions, and I don't want to waste your time because the main dish is after that.
In the online classified space, our leading brands are reimagining commerce every day.
But it was
amazing. And more sustainable choices by helping everything and everyone find a new purpose. Be it said hard to find gift or that awesome deal. We are there at every meaningful moment in your life. And while our hearts beat for local markets, our impact goes beyond borders. With every second-hand trade, we are shaping Europe and the world towards inclusive societies, a healthier environment, and thriving economies. Championing for sustainable commerce. We are Advinta, changing commerce together.
So just keep in mind 2 ideas. We are a sustainable company. We try to recycle everything by just commercing with second-hand goods. And if you have something to sell, it will be a house, will it be anything like a car or whatever, you can go to any of the portals of Advinta. And without more ado, let's go for Jean-Baptiste Kempf, lead developer in VLC, that will tell us how was their journey in the VLC product. Jean-Baptiste? All for you.
So now it's not going to work, of course, because else it would be too fun. You see, it works. Probably because I'm using a software. I don't know if you know about that. It's called KDE. Works quite well. Hi. So I'm very happy to be here in Barcelona. I love that city. I'm not often here, and maybe with the weather I should be more. It's quite funny to be in Adevinta, right? Because I've been using Le Bon Coin for years, right? And and well, Le Bon Coin is where there is the best of France and the worst. But yeah, so today we're going to talk about Videolan. I'm not a teacher, so stop me, right? Ask me questions, right? Videolan is a bit different from the normal open source organization, mostly because, well, we're not as well behaved as the others. And there is a lot of reasons for that, right? But let's see about why. So my name is Jean-Baptiste. Everyone calls me JB, right? So don't worry, it's impossible to say that name. I've been working on VLC for now 18 years, 19 years. And the story of VLC is a stupid and insane one. And the goal of Videolan is that you have cones and everywhere. And when you see a cone, you think, hey, software, right? Not traffic roads. That makes no sense. But that's one of the stupidities that we're doing. Okay, so the story starts at the École Centrale Paris, which is one of those weird elite engineering school in France, right? This completely weird system that you'd only see in Korea. But anyway, those how we have the best engineers in France. And the École Centrale Paris is a university that depends on the Ministry of Education, right? Most of the other elite schools are Ministry of Industry or Army or something. This one is from the education, and so it's a poor university. So the story starts in the 1960s in France. They have a very nice campus near Gare de Lyon, so downtown Paris, and so they can have only 100 students per year, right? And so they decided, because it was called École Centrale Paris, to move to somewhere they had more space and that it was cheap, so decided to move to Clermont-Ferrand, right? You probably don't know where it is, right? It's the middle of, it's in Paris. Most French people wouldn't know where it would be, right? It's like literally in the middle of nowhere, right? And there is nothing there, right? So it's like something like you go take Madrid, you go 100 kilometers north, right, where there is nothing, right? That place, right? Around that, right? And so the alumni says, okay, no go, we cannot do that, right? And because they have no money, they decide to buy this piece of land south of Paris, which is near Parc de Sceaux, which is like a big park, right? Don't worry, I'm going to speak about VLC, right? But that's the reasons why we have VLC, right? So, and so you have arrived at this very weird case where it's a university, public university, managed by the Ministry of Education, right? So like most public school you can get, built on a private land, right? And the private land is owned by the alumni, the non-profit of the alumni, but still it's not public, right? And the consequence of that is that everything on the campus is managed by the students, like phones, television, food, drinks, but also like room management. Well, everything is owned and managed by the students. And in the 80s, they start a non-profit, a small association, which is called Vivre l'informatique autrement. Completely stupid, but it was basically IBM who wanted to have somewhere to play and to have a laboratory, and so they deploy 1,500 token ring. Do you know what token ring is? None, right? So you knew, okay? Okay, so they do a very large network at 10 megabits per second in the 80s, and token ring is a network technology in a ring and not with routers, right? So instead of everyone talking to a router and have an IP address, what you do is that you talk to your neighbor, like when you hold hands and you press it, and you send the network packet, and then you send it to the next one, which sends to the next one, and on. The good thing is very cheap, right? Because you don't need routers, you don't need anything. The problem is that it's slow, right? Because it's as slow as the slowest computer on it, right? And if one of the computer is slow, it's going to read the packet, say, is it for me? No, right? And then you go on, right? So in the 80s, it's okay, right? Where you use Spine and MUT, maybe not even MUT, right? You telnet to somewhere and you send a mail, but it's not good enough in the early 90s where we start to have Zoom and you want to play in network, right? And of course, the students arrive and say, "Oh, you know, our software, we need a faster network for work, right? The web is here, right? And the university understands why it's for to play video games, right? And they answer in the most hypocritical French way, which is, guys, we would love to help you, right? There is a letter. We would love to help you, but as you understand, this is a private piece of land. We cannot help you. So please go and see the partners of the university, meaning corporate sponsors, right? Which was a way to say, fuck you. But polite, right? But the students are stupid, right? And stubborn. So that's exactly what they do, right? So they go and see IBM, 3Com. They go and see Bouygues Telecom, Bouygues, which was like this concrete manufacturer in France, right? Who's building half of the building of France. And of course, who built the campus. And one of the guys says, okay, I understand nothing about that, but you know, we're working with TF1 and TPS, right? So televisions. And the future of video is satellite. Well, it's not. But in 1995, well, that was a good bet, right? And say, if you can, instead of putting 1,500 satellite dish and decoders, right? Those were big satellite dish and the decoders were, and costed some around 2,000 francs at that time. It was like millions to get there, right? So do that and put only one dish here on the B building, and then send that everywhere, right? So we are talking about 1994, right? The computer for 486 DX at 33 megahertz or 66 megahertz. Having video decoding real time on those machines was science fiction. But they say, okay, sure, we'll do that. And so they start the project in 1996, and the project was called Network 2000. Yeah, of course, right? And basically, well, they managed to do it, right? After 1996, 1997, there was a demo of 40 seconds, right? Because at 45 seconds, everything was crashing. The machine was with a huge amount of 64 megabytes of RAM, which was needed because, of course, the software was leaking. But yeah, they had an ATM network at 155 megabits per second, probably one of the fastest in the world at that time. Top notch. Of course, the connection to internet was 1 megabit per second, but we don't say that. And the project could have stopped there. But, and of course, it was working on Linux and on Linux and on Linux, basically. Some of them, and the project could have stopped here, but some of the new students arrived, because every year it was a student project, and say, okay, I want to video on a network, video on a local network, Video LAN, amazing name, better than Network 2000, right? Manage to say, well, maybe other people care about that. And we want that to be open source, right? Because of course, the best guys are doing open source. A few were. In order to get the project to do, they had to compile the Linux kernel and modify things to get support for multicast and so on. So, and of course, the university said, you know what? We own your IP. Because when you sign the contract as a student, right, you say that basically you give all your copyright to the school, right? So starts a 2 years and a half fight between the école and the students to relicense that as GPL. And so in 2001, Video LAN becomes GPL. Of course, that means nothing because nothing was called Video LAN, but well, it's good enough. The project at the time had servers, clients, and of course, a lot of networking technology that is dead. But one of the things that they did was to do multicast on a non-multicast network. basically the software. So if you wanted to watch the television, you had to go. It was broadcasting on different VLANs, and so the software was calling a central point, which was changing your IP, your plug to a different VLAN. And of course, if your software like VLC crashed, well, no internet for you anymore because you're on the wrong VLAN. Anyway, so this became VideoLAN, right? And since 2001, it's an open source project, and there's a lot of software. One of them is VLC, probably the most known, but it's also X264, the encoder, which is probably the most used video encoder in the world. Everything you see on YouTube, Facebook, Netflix, and so on, it's based on that. But we have a ton of other libraries for DVD decryption, Blu-ray decryption. So it's a bit like KDE GNOME, except we are smaller and we have less projects, but that's the idea, right? It's really an umbrella organization. VLC is the most known. And as you understand, it came from VideoLAN client, and then we drop it because it's also a server now. And de facto, we are the core of the open source multimedia community, right? We're doing hosting for FFmpeg. We're giving money to libv codec, to OBS. We organize most of the open source video event, and also we work on standards, mostly free software and free standards like AV1. Yeah. When I'm in the middle of nowhere in India or in Africa, right, and I speak about VLC, like a lot of them don't even know what VLC, but when I say the fucking cone that plays video, yeah, they know that. And of course, the École Centrale Paris, like no one cares, right? No one knows. Why? Drunk students who play with cone on the campus, of course. And also like someone did it in the software and then you couldn't remove it, right? Because when it's in, never gets out. And today it's a very, very, very strong brand, right? People know about VLC, people know about the cone that plays video, right? So at some point we had the icon redesign, and we're talking about around 1 million downloads per day, around 500 million active users. So, as I say, it's probably the most used French software and the least profitable. Well, 0 divided by 500 million, right? How much is that, right? On our website, we have around 5.3 billion downloads, right? And so it's difficult to know exactly the user base because we don't do, what do they call it? Telemetry, which I call spying. So we need to estimate it, right? And a lot of people are distributing outside. And yeah, during COVID, we knew that on Windows, there were 2 billions of 2 billions, what was it? 2 billions of minutes of usage of VLC on Windows 10 per day, whatever that means. And of course, on Linux, right? It's very difficult to know how many people are actually running Linux worldwide. I don't know, how many people are running Linux worldwide? 100 million? 200 million? Anyway, it's popular because it's playing absolutely everything, right? And you have to understand that at the beginning, it wasn't designed to. That's yet another weird thing about VLC, right? No one said, oh, I'm going to do a better video player and I'm going to put all the codecs in it, right? It was just like, oh, now that I put it on Windows, how do I ship all the packages that I depend from Linux? Where is my Windows packager? And then they realized that there wasn't, right? So they decided to package all the codecs because that was the easiest, because most of them were Linux developers and had no clue about registry and so on, right? But this proved to be exactly what people needed, right? Like not having to download something that doesn't work. And so VLC plays everything. And also because we don't really care about licensing of patents and stuff like that. We decrypt DVDs, we decrypt Blu-rays, we ship. Like if I had to pay for all the stuff, all the license of all the codecs and the patents, I would need to pay maybe 100 or 200 euros per user. But I don't know who my users are, right? Because I'm not tracking them. And at the time, there were people who had downloaded DivX and other stuff on DC or Emule or Casa or BitTorrent, things that, of course, none of you ever done because that's completely illegal and you shouldn't do that. But yeah. And also it runs everywhere. The last version of VLC, the latest release, still works on Windows XP up to Windows 11, but it still runs on OS 2, which means that the 5 users of OS 2 are very happy, right? Of course, all types of Linux, BOS, BSDs, and of course, Android, iOS, even on the web, right? We have a VLC version only on web. That's a very old slide, but that gives you the idea of what VideoLAN was. And you see that after years, it's still the same, right? You can use VLC to take any type of video cards, satellites, take things, transcode, and stream that. And that's you realize where VLC is not just a player, it's also a streamer, it's also a real-time encoder, it's basically a multimedia framework. So old versions of VLC. You see it's still written video on the client. This is probably on a GNOME 2 or even before, probably. And of course, it's a James Bond movie. The reasons we used a lot is that when they added the support of VLC DVD playback, they had a GoldenEye DVD. That's the only DVD they had, and that's why all the numbers of VideoLAN were named after James Bond. Okay, well, that's very old UI, but the first versions where it was able to play directly the TV. First version on macOS. That's the version that was the most known with WX widgets, which is a widget library. Don't ever use that ever if you can, unless you like pain, which, okay, then do it. Versions of macOS, and then of course the version that is the best using Qt running on GNOME 3 that plays ponies. So most of the development of VLC was done by volunteers. A lot of them were students at the École Centrale Paris and then moved away. But still, like, it's quite important to remind that only volunteers, or mostly volunteers. On the Cathedral and Bazaar, we are mostly on the Bazaar side, like really Bazaar, more than other nonprofits like KDE and GNOME, which are quite organized. And one of the reasons that, like, a lot of us have been doing reverse engineering of codecs, reverse engineering of DVD protocols, and so on. So yeah, we are not very well behaved. Today, the VideoLAN nonprofit is around 30 people, and then you have a lot of FFmpeg, X264 people joining. So the nonprofit is quite poor. We have 30 members. Membership is free, but you need to be accepted, which is difficult to get accepted. I created that in 2008. It mostly has money to buy hardware. We need a lot of hardware for video, lots of graphic cards that we buy and then don't do anything with it. A lot of phones. And then, of course, travel servers, legal. For a long time, we've been using IRC, right? So that's Slack for old people, and mailing list. We had a lot of things on Track, PHPBD, MediaWiki, and so on. We moved everything to GitLab. We have, of course, our own GitLab because we don't trust anyone else than us. And all the software we're using is open source, and everything that we deploy is open source. I think this is pretty standard, and we had a very early code of conduct before it was a fashion to have it. So if you look at our code of conduct, it's very simple. VLC code contributors are around 5 to 10 people, right? It's always very, very small. Over the lifetime of VLC, we're talking about more than 1,000. Every year, we have around 150 contributors. And the decisions on VLC is mostly done on the quality of code. And that's why you sometimes don't understand why some basic features are not in VLC and some completely stupid ones are in. It's just because technically, like statistically, no one contributes and stays, right? You have 1,000 people, 10 are left, right? Statistically, if you send me patches, you're going to go away, right? Because you're going to change job, you're going to change spouse, you're going to have an accident, you're going to, I don't know, be acquired by Meta or Facebook and so on, right? We have no marketing, almost no legal. the people who have the code get more votes when we have to take decisions, basically. And so far, we never had any forks. So why is VLC popular, right? That's a good question, right? So it's not just by luck. It's also about some decisions which maybe were not done for the right reasons, but were done, right? One of them is to ship all the codecs on macOS and Windows because those were Linux developers. But there are a few things that are quite interesting. The first one is that we're using modules. The second one is that we're using C++, and then that we are network oriented. So let me explain all that. The architecture of VLC is quite simple, right? It's the code is very light. It's around 80,000 lines of C, right? It's 100,000 lines of C. It's not big, right? And what it does is basically doing abstraction across different type of operating systems, has managed memory, networking and threads, and loading modules. And then it does the basic thing, which is audio, video synchronization. But that's the only thing that does, right? Doesn't have no UI, no codecs, no nothing. And above that, there is a binding called libVLC, which is a simpler API and which is stable. So because of that, everything that you implement is a module, right? And that's very good, right? Because you want to add a new feature, you touch a module. You want to have a new decoder, you add a module. You want to port VLC to a new platform, you're just going to do an audio output, a video output, and a UI, right? So the other way to do that is to take the library that does it on all platforms, and then you have OpenGL and SDL, and then you have pain for the rest of your life. And the reasons why VLC people did modules was absolutely not because of that reason. The reason is that it was faster to compile because they had slow machines. And so they compiled everything on modules, right? But that forced some very simple API for all the modules because there is basically 3 functions, open, close, and a describe, and that's it. But that managed to get a very simple way to add features. Also, most of the modules are cross-platform, and some of them are on-platform. So we have lots of people who arrive and say, hey, I'm porting VLC to OS2. Sure. And so the port of OS2, I don't care. It doesn't break because it's just a few modules. That was a good decision. Again, not because they thought about it, but because they were lucky. Yeah. C, right? The project refused to use C++ for a long time. So we are doing a type of inheritance in C, right? So pointer to functions or pointer to functions and pointer to functions. This is actually very good, right? Because today that's less a problem, but in the past, like C++ support was a pain on many platforms where we ported things. But also, it forces to have a very simple language. C is a pain. It will always be a pain, but it's a simple pain. As soon as you move to C++, then you have multiple planes, and you need to find the right subversion of the C++ standard that you all agree on, which you don't. There is we have some common members, common objects, and then we do simple inheritance like that. You pass the object, and then the core gives you an object, you modify a few things, and you give it back. The problem of that is that you need to really understand threads, and by experience, most people don't. And the third reason why it became quite popular is this network-oriented graph, right? So protocols would be HTTP, file, FTP, right? So you put an URL here, and then you have a stream of data here, and then you have a format which is MKV, MP4, AVI. Then it splits with video, audio, subtitles, metadata, and then you go, the subtitle gets rendered in text, the video is filtered and then displayed, and the audio same is displayed, and then you have your ear that is somewhere here, and your eyes that is somewhere here, right? The thing is, if you look at this graph, there is something weird, right? If you look at the left part of, you see those 2 arrows? They go in the wrong direction, right? VLC, a contrario from most video player and even more most things like YouTube, is that VLC is going to eat only what is required by the format, right? So when you give a buffer in VLC, you don't give it by saying, I want 5 megabytes or something like that. You give a constant timing, right? You'd say a caching of 300 milliseconds or 500 milliseconds or 1 second. And basically, VLC is going to pull the data from the protocol only that it needs to play the file, right? This, and if you remember when you go on YouTube, you see, even if you don't watch it, right? This never happens with VLC because it's only going to consume what it needs. But because of that, VLC is very resilient to incomplete files because it considers normal to not have access to the whole file. It considers normal to not have access and not being able to seek in the file because maybe you're on a UDP protocol. And this is the reasons why VLC can play completely broken files because you say, hey, it doesn't work. Let's try anyway. And that's, for example, very good when you're downloading for 24 hours a file over Donkey, and you want to be sure that the Disney movie is an actual Disney movie and not an adult file. When you're watching an adult file, you're not downloading a rugby match or whatever, right? And the thing is, very quickly after a few megabytes, right, VLC is able to not watch, but give you some information, right? Oh, yeah, I'm able to watch it. And that's pretty cool. And that's one of the reasons why VLC was popular. So I'm going to show you stupid features, which makes no sense, that we have in VLC, but that all of those have a very, very low maintenance, right? We have a VNC support, right? We have audio, we have video, you have clicks, because you need to be able to click on DVD menus, right? So, hey, this is VNC. Works also with remote desktop. You can do mosaic. Basically, this is one VLC decoding 20 video, resizing them, putting them together and streaming out, right? VLC is not a player, right? It's a multimedia framework like GStreamer or UPipe or DirectShow. Since 2003, we have a wall display, right? So a lot of places where you see like big walls of TVs, often it's a VLC running it, right? On each of the machine, there is a VLC actually decoding the whole file, but just displaying some part of it. We support karaoke and MIDI. Why not, right? It's popular in Asia, but we have this, which is a puzzle filter in VLC, right? So once when you're watching a French movie and you're bored, right, because it's a French movie, you can activate the puzzle and then you can drag the pieces around, right? And you've never seen it? Right, maybe I can show it. Where do I have a file I can show you? Yeah, no. Yeah, that's boring. It's forbidden. So. Okay. So video effects. Advanced. Okay. So and then of course I can go there and I can grab this is around, right? And right?
And actually, that actually works, right? And yeah, okay. You see, there is a small part above everywhere at the bottom, so that you can see it, right?
So this looked stupid, right? And that's as stupid as you can guess. But the guys who did that was a teacher, a math teacher, who wanted to explain Bayer curves to his students, right? And actually coded that a long time ago. And the code is quite clean. It works pretty well. It's very efficient in VLC. Yeah, I merged it, and I was just like, yeah, no one cares. Until one day there is a mail that receives and says, this title was "Puzzle Too Simple." I was just like, so, and the mail is like that. Yeah, JB, yeah, it's a bit a weird question and so on, but I love the puzzles filter, and it's only 16 by 16, and that's only 256 thing. And during a movie, right, it's too easy, right? And I finished too early, right? And I'm just like, do you think that you could increase that number? And actually, the change was like, it's in the Qt UI, right? It's not actually in the filter that there is it. And so I, of course, changed that, right? And added that. And it was just like, no way, right? And the thing is, when you have that many number of users, even a stupid filter that no one uses, there are people who are actually using that. And yeah, I don't. We have a version, of course, that is without UI, right? Well, which is useful for geeks, right? But still, you have the video that is not there, right? So what happens when you don't have an X11 client? Well, of course, we have an output which is using libkk, which is also something done by, of course, one of the VLC guy, and which is using ASCII arts, right? Not even Unicode to display. It's very used, right? And one of the best use case of that is that you have a multicast network, you don't know when the video is not working, where it is, right? So you SSH to all the routers, and you're just going to watch whether you have video or not. And that's useful, right? Because you're not going to run X11 or Wayland if anyone is actually using that in real life. Sorry. First version of VLC on Android, right? Quite ugly. This is the current version of Android. And now we have a version running even on Android TVs. We had the first version on iOS using this very ugly, very early iOS style. The current one is a bit more classic. We have a version that runs on watchOS. It brings you battery in half an hour. Of course, it's not on the store because Apple dictatorship doesn't allow us to do that, but still it's cool. Versions on Apple TV, we had versions for VR when VR was all the rage, which was 5 years ago. It's going to be full VR soon again, right? Because Apple is arriving with their stupid Apple Vision Pro. That was the version we had for the which is a bit different from the Windows version, which was what was it called? Windows Metro, Windows RT, or whatever that was. That's dead. And of course, we had a version for Tizen for phones, which is also dead. Okay. This one is an interesting thing that we added in VLC3, which is complex text support, right? So as all of you correctly read at the bottom, this is Japanese and Korean, right? But it's interesting because the story starts like that. Someone arrives and says, saying, JB, my name is Salahuddin Salah. I am in East Aleppo. I go on Le Monde, there is like bombing. I'm just like, okay, sure. I have 2 hours of electricity and 2 hours of internet per day, but I have nothing to do. Can you give me a task on VLC? Do you know C? Just like, no, I will learn. Sure. So I asked him, you know what? Do you know Arabic? Can you check Arabic, right? Because Arabic support was horrible, and weirdly rendering text is insanely complex, right? So Arabic, And so, yeah. And Arabic is horrible because you need to write from left to right and then right to left for the numbers, and then it's very difficult. And of course, you have all those ligatures which change the shape and so on, right? Very difficult. So the guy say, okay, and leaves. And then after, I don't know, 3 months, I receive a patch. The patch is horrible. I explained to him. And after 4 months, well, it's merged. Right? The guys come back and say, hey, can you help me? I need to do something else. Just like, yeah, I got an Hebrew issue, right? And I was just like, JB, are you insane? You're asking from someone who's in Aleppo, in Syria, getting bombed, and asking him to support Hebrew, right? Like, are you? And the guy said, yeah, sure. Leaves, come back, right? I'm just like, oh, I'm bored and I'm still on the war. What can I do? I'm just like, yeah, I need support for what we call complex text layout, which is that, right? And that you all have recognized as Malayalam, which is, of course, an Southeast India language, very complex, right? A lot of very complex ligature that you can see here, right? Those are, and for that to render, you need not only free type and free BD like Arabic, but then you need something like half-buzz, which is something that is not documented. And because, of course, most of the fonts don't have the right glyphs, you need to support font config and so on. That's a nightmare. Guy leaves and does that. Amazing. We got merged. I like, Salah, what do you want, right? Do you want, I don't know, like, you want to come to France? Do you want? And the guy says, can I have a Videolan email and a recommendation letter? Insane. So to give you an idea, a generic VLC release is around 20,000 commits. It's always a bit long to come. The 3.0 was important because it was a focus on mobile and desktop, which was doing a lot of support and supporting Wayland. The next generation is called Auto Schrick, because after GoldenEye and James Bond, we moved to, of course, these word names. It's one of the major versions, and we're dropping a lot of things. We've, of course, did too many things, so we have lots of issues actually finishing things, a bit like KDE4. But yeah, that looks like that currently. It's a bit different from what we've done in the past. This is a media library. Well, it's going to change soon, but it is what we designed at the beginning. So it's still active. Okay. So let's talk about other things, right? Then VLC, there is this old video codec called AV1, which was like an answer to HEVC and VVC, right? So multimedia is a patent field, right? There is patents everywhere. Anything you do, there is a patent, right? It's the most patented field in all technologies with 5G, basically. And so Google and Facebook and so on decided to do a new codec, and that was called AV1. Was mostly Google and Cisco and Mozilla doing it. It's pretty cool, but the thing is, we felt that it was going to be very difficult to merge and to have support of that, right? Because people are using H.264, it works fine. So how do you make things, right? And of course, because Google was Google, they say, what we've done is great, and everyone will follow. Yeah, no one did. So I said that we need a very, very good AV1 decoder in software. So we wrote this piece of code called David. And David is an AV1 decoder. That's an acronym. It's interesting because it's around 30,000 lines of C, easy, right? But around 240,000 lines of handwritten assembly. That's probably one of the largest software in the world. I don't know anyone that insane to do that except us. There is more handwritten assembly in David than the rest on FFmpeg. And of course, it's using Chrome, Firefox, Windows. It's now the default AV1 decoder on Android. It's being used by Netflix, VLC, FFmpeg, and so on. And you can see that the people who wrote AV1 are doing the blue ones. And this is what we have, right? So we are around 5 times faster than what they did. Yeah, it's pretty insane. Pretty fun. Yes, writing assembly by hand is fun. we are working on other things, right? One of the things we're working on is called VLC.wasm. So we compile all VLC, the million lines of code of C, plus all the dependencies in WebAssembly, and we run that inside the web browser so that you can play any type of file without transcoding them directly in the web browser. Works pretty well. We have a lot of security issue in VLC because we're parsing C files we're parsing media files by hand in C, right? So it's crashing all the time. So we're working on doing a sandbox around VLC. It's difficult to do, mostly because the sandbox, everyone is using the Chrome sandbox. The Chrome sandbox is huge, around 200,000 lines of code. So we don't want to import all that. But mostly is that we need a sandbox that is able to output gigabits per second, right? Not 5 megabyte page, right? And we need to be real time for everything we're doing. So that's pretty difficult, especially because we want that to be cross-platform. But yeah, that's basically the research project we're working on. And I think I've spoken too much. So any questions? Don't be shy.
Where do you get your funding? Like, I know that you don't have a lot of funding.
You have no money.
Zero money.
Zero.
Okay.
Nada. Nada. Videolan is only receiving money through donations on our website, because if you go on our website, you can see right, you can donate €4 or $5 here, and you go to right, that's it. It's the only way we get money, right? So that's not much money, but also we wouldn't get any money, right? Any video engineer costs hundreds of thousands of dollars per year, right? So we have jobs, and one of the job is I created a few companies around VLC, but they are consulting company basically.
How do you manage, because you said there are patents and royalties, how do you manage to avoid being sued by?
Let's play a game. You're a lawyer, right? Okay. You're now a patent lawyer. Okay. Talk to me.
I want money.
Je suis désolé, je ne parle pas anglais. Est-ce que vous pouvez m'expliquer en français? That technique cuts 80%. Go. Then you're going to tell me, no, JP, I've seen you speak English, right?
Or as in French, but yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Can you show me your patent?
Sure.
No, that's just at least 10% of the patent, 10 extra percent. They say, oh, you need mad money. I'm just saying, money for what? Show me your patent. 10% again, leave, right? So just with those two techniques, you cut 90%, right? And then I start looking at the patent and just like, you know that we implemented in VLC before your patent. Do you still want to discuss, or do you want us to say that publicly that your patent is void? Usually we never hear about them anymore. Most of the patents are bogus. That's the thing, right? Most of the patents, not all of them are bogus, right? But most of them have no idea what they're saying. And it's like, just like, oh, I have 10,000 patents. Well, I have 20,000. Okay, please pay, right? Most of them make no sense. And all of them, well, so the problem is also that we have no money, right? So if try to attack me, right, and you manage to it, I'm just like, oh yeah, we have 30,000 euros on our bank account. Do you still want to attack us? Do you want to handle the PR about attacking VLC to gain what? And most of the time, I know better the patents than the people who wrote it. But Are we always trolling? Yes.
When's VLC 4 coming out?
When it's ready, no idea.
Is it ever going to be ready? Is it?
We did a few mistakes, and that was also because at some point of my life I was a bit too busy outside of VLC, but we did too many things, and we modified the core. At the same time, we moved to QML, and that was not a good idea, right? If I had to do it, I wouldn't move to QML. It's a very bad tech, not finished, and that's quite complex. You get there. Probably at the end of this year, we'll have something a bit more strong, but I'm very annoying, right? So until I'm happy, no release.
You said everything is a module. Has it happened that you have to change the interface between, the core and the modules, and then someone has to port everything to the new interface, and it's a lot of work, and you maybe prefer killing modules than porting them or something like this? Does it happen?
No, it never happened, right? Because you're going, I need to find the right place, but it was moved lately, but there is like 3 functions, like really 3 functions, right? It's with a VLC object in close. And in the VLC object, when you open, maybe I can show you, it's easier in the other direction. So when you write a VLC module, right, you declare the open function and the close function, right? Here you just, well, it didn't have even a close version, right? So you say, oh, this is a module. You give the input type, right? So the category of the module, you give a name, the capability, which is basically is it a very important module? Because when you're going to open all the module of this category, and then you're going to set the callbacks, right? And sometimes you don't even closing callback, right? Because you don't need that. So let's go and see what is in the open decoder. So the function here basically takes the object that is giving to the core, it casts it as a decoder because it knows that it's a decoder. It basically checks that the codec is PNG, right? If it's not, it tells you no. And the probe functions, it's a probe function, right? Then you allocate, you malloc the context, you set a few things, and then you write PFD code on the VLC object, right? And that's the only thing you do, right? So you have an open function, a close function, and in the context that is giving you by the VLC object that you're casting static cast, right? Because you know that you're a decoder, you're going to add, well, PFD code. And so when you close that function with a success, then the core knows that there is PDEC PFD code, and it's going to call the code. Right? So
you could argue that that's part of the interface, though.
Yeah, but how many times would you change that, right?
Maybe right. Not for a video codec, but for the UI. You said the UI is also
same for the UI, right? The interface between the core and the UI is almost small, right? Because you're just going to say launch UI. So the interface between the core, right? And so the way you from the UI call the core, this one is where you're using libVLC core. So the not to launch the module, but to call back the core. This API changes all the time. That's what we call libVLC core, and it's and so that's what libVLC core is. So even every small version, we break that API, right? So third-party applications which use libVLC don't link to libVLC core, they link to libVLC, right? So the interface to load the module and call the module is very simple. We don't change it, but the way to call back the core is very complex. Well, complex-ish.
Any other question? If there is no more questions, I have one question. Do you do things with video and codecs, and do you have code that leverages the possibility to have a GPU inside the machine that is running VLC?
Yes. Now, most of the codecs are hardware accelerated. Lots of video filter are hardware accelerated, and now we have some AI in VLC modules. So yeah, GPUs are quite important. And when you're on a phone, right, like you need everything on the GPU. There is no other way.
Well, thank you.
Last question. Sure.